Hey y'all! Well, back for another product review, and this is a little device from BenQ called a treVolo. And they reached out to me because usually on this channel we're doing DIY audio stuff, and I guess they thought that I'd be a good person to objectively review this product. We do a lot of listening sessions on stereo gear with me and my friends, and that's what I plan on doing with this, and really see if this does what they claim it does. What they claim this is for is it's excellent for human voice reproduction and recording, like your Zoom meetings, that sort of thing. I'm also interested to see what it sounds like with music. Could be a nice thing just to have in the kitchen or something to play music from your phone to as well. So let's go ahead and unbox this thing and see what you get when you buy this guy. This is kind of a, oh, there we go. Duh. So here's our quick start guide in several languages. This is probably your little warranty card. Comes with a USB-C cable with your other USB style port on the other side. Comes with a, looks like, phone plug for whichever phones still have those. Comes with a power jack. That's cool. A lot of devices nowadays don't come with a power up thing, so you got to supply your own USB supply. And then looks like they've got it all wrapped up nice and some foam padding here. I think that's about it for the box. And then here's the little speaker. And that's a really nice looking little speaker. It's got a metal grill. It's got this blue color, which I think looks really nice. I'm assuming that's the microphone. Again, I need to look at the instructions. And Bluetooth button, volume up and down, power button, and not sure what these other ones are. And again, need to read the instructions so that I can actually review this thing correctly. And while this isn't an inexpensive product, it's not really expensive either. And I mean, it's got a nice feel to it. It's got a nice weight to it. And it's got some rubberized stuff on the bottom of it, so it's not going to slide around. And yeah, initial impression, seems like a really high quality made thing. But the proof is going to be in the pudding. And you guys may be new to my channel. You may be here just to see the review of this and you've never seen my content before. I don't sugarcoat stuff. If something's garbage, I'm going to say it's garbage. And if it sounds good, I'm going to tell you it sounds good. And if it turns out this thing sounds, really nice with a human voice, but the music part just isn't really very good, and that you should stick to just listening to voices with it, because that's what it's designed for. But it may have some sort of tuning with it where you can adjust it for music or voice kind of a thing. Again, I need to sit down and read the instructions so I can be more about it, but I just opened the box here on the camera, so I have no idea what all this thing can do. So anyway, this is part one of this little video, and obviously we're going to have a second part after I've spent some time with this thing and listened to it and had me and my friends and some other folks kind of listen to it, and I'll come back with a part two with a more subjective opinion, especially after I read the instructions so I know what this thing's actually doing. So stay tuned. Well, I went off and did several hours of listening testing with a friend of mine, comparing this speaker to what I consider kind of the benchmark Bluetooth speaker, which is that oval can-shaped Bose speaker that a ton of people have. I mean, it was a very popular little speaker. It's got a good sound, and I felt like it was a good thing to compare this to without getting a half a dozen different speakers in a shootout. So we're going to be comparing this to this Bose speaker, which is designed for music and, home theater kind of, or I wouldn't say home theater, but, in addition to maybe a flat screen TV to, add some better sound to a system like that without getting into the whole home theater thing. And so first let's talk about what this speaker was designed for, which is to reproduce human voice accurately and easy to understand, which is kind of a niche market, but that's okay. You know, if you're in a market for something to use while you're studying, listening to, instructional videos for hours at a time, you want something that's easy to listen to. And I think people discount how fatiguing poor quality audio is when you're listening for long periods of time and trying to understand someone's voice and what they're saying. And that's where this little speaker really excels. Tried it with some YouTube videos that had music in the background, which is one of the most distracting things, but a lot of people want to do that. They have like a review or an instructional video and they want to play background music through the whole thing of them talking. And for a lot of people it makes it difficult to understand what they're saying. Well, this box really brought out their voice and suppress the music or whatever background noise. Some of the stuff that I listen to has environmental noise. They'll be out at a construction site, or they'll be out somewhere where there's other outdoor noise, airplanes flying over and stuff. And this speaker was great at really pulling the voice out of that recording and making it easy to understand. So again, the market this is targeted at, it really does a great job at. So the other thing we tried was using it for phone calls. And a lot of people don't really like being on a speakerphone, and I get that. It does sound kind of echoey and weird and that kind of a thing. Plus, it's hard to hear sometimes what they're saying. Their voice sounds really tinny, and so I wanted to see what that was like. So one of the cool features this thing has, it's got an automated volume control that determines how far you are away from the speaker and then sets the volume according to that so it will be pleasing. And that seems to work good. And it does have manual volume controls too, but the little automatic volume control I was a little skeptical of, but it worked really good. So back to using it for phone calls. It works great for that. And I will say that the receiving end of the phone call versus just a speakerphone, your phone sitting on the table, easily a 200% improvement in the sound quality and being able to understand what the folks are saying. The transmission going the other way, maybe a 50% improvement. It did sound less echoey, and listening to it with someone else talking, I was listening on their phone, I could hear it was less echoey and it sounded less speakerphone-ish, but the improvement wasn't as dramatic, which it's not that big a deal. I mean, I still think it does a good job recording your voice, but it's never going to work as good as using something like a lav mic that's closer to your mouth. And that's one of the things about recording audio. To get really clean audio, this microphone needs to be near your mouth. And I guess the closer you sit to this, the better that it would work. But if you're, you got it sitting here and you're back about this far, it's not going to be great. It's not going to be like, you're talking into the phone with your mouth right up to the mouthpiece. So don't expect miracles from that. But as far as people in a room, like if you've got a group meeting and you're listening to someone speaking to the group, this is really going to help clarify their voice and what the phone call sounds like. So on the controls, it's got a 3-way button here. The first press with the lights off, the first press, it is for music. Press it one time and it goes into voice mode where it improves the quality of a voice sound. And then you push it again and it's learning mode that clarifies the voice even a little more and is good for two-way conversations rather than just you listening. Got a Bluetooth button. Thing hooks up to Bluetooth without any issues. I mean, as soon as I turn it on, if my phone's nearby, it's Bluetooth. And pairing it up was simple. Just pair a new device, and it did it. Hold the button down, it unpairs so you can pair it to something else. No issues there. This is kind of the obvious one, power button. You hold it down for a couple seconds, it powers on. It's got 3 LEDs to tell you how much power is left. Now that I've covered what it's really good at, I'm going to talk about some of the weaknesses I found with it. And the out-of-the-box configuration sound of it sounded like the treble was a little too bright. And this is from an audiophile perspective. And it didn't have a ton of bass. And then when I got back from my vacation, when we were down there testing this thing at my friend's house, the company sent me a notification that there was a firmware update. And so downloaded some software. It was pretty easy to do the firmware update. You hold down the power and Bluetooth buttons, and then you hit the power button, and these 3 LEDs start blinking. You plug the cable in, you run the software, and it updates the firmware. I will say after the firmware update that the music reproduction sounds much better. It mellowed out the treble, and the bass seems a little better, and it just seems more even kind of frequency response. And both the voice modes sound better too, especially the interactive mode was a little grating. It was just a little too bright, and that got mellowed out with this firmware update. So if you buy one of these, definitely first thing, go to the support site, download the update, and do the firmware update to it. Newer units are probably going to come with the updated firmware already in them. You can check that with the app. There's also a phone app that interfaces with this unit that lets you change some settings. You can adjust the volume, and if you're driving this with a phone, you can adjust the volume with your phone or on the box. And when you adjust the buttons here, it changes the volume control on your phone. So it's all interactive connected. Anyway, the app has settings where you can change these sound modes from music to voice to interactive. And then you can also turn on and off the distance volume setting. But the other neat thing it has is profiles. And it'll go through a hearing test with you for both the music and the voice mode, and it'll play different tones, and then as you hear them, you say, I can hear it or I don't hear it, and then it programs the frequency response of this speaker to your hearing. And that really improved the way this little speaker sounds. Also, if you're audiophile or you're really into music, you can kind of fake the thing out and say that, like, I can't hear the lower frequencies, and it'll crank up the bass, and you can tamp down the mid-range, you can crank up the higher frequencies, and you can basically use that part of the app as an equalizer to adjust the sound of the speaker to your taste. And I made 3 different music profiles that I could switch between and then pick the one that sounded the best to me. The voice one, the same thing, and I just went with the default settings of, like, as soon as I could hear it, I'd hit I could hear it and just let it program that, and that seemed to work great for the voice part. So the only thing that I would like to see on the app, and this is just from me being an audiophile, was that there was an option of your basic equalizer where you could, instead of doing the little hearing test thing, you could just open up another window and make a program or a profile with, different sliders on the app where you could adjust the volume at different frequencies like we're used to doing in almost any other audio app. And I would think that would be a fairly simple thing for them to do in software, and it would give music aficionados like us, most of the people that usually watch my channel, this is an audio channel, we would appreciate having some kind of functionality like that in the app so that we could really dial in where we know we want the speaker to be brighter or whether we want the bass cranked up or down and that sort of thing without having to fake out this little hearing test app to force it to do that. So hopefully the manufacturer will watch this video and maybe take my hint and add that functionality to the app. I think that would add a lot to the speaker because I could be wrong, but it seems like that once you burn that profile into the speaker with the app, that's what it sounds like with or without the app turned on, so that you can basically permanently set the sound signature of the speaker so it's not doing it via the signal being sent to the speaker. You know what I'm saying? It's actually changing the equalization inside the speaker to the settings that the app sets on it. Hope that makes sense. So anyway, the music quality of this versus the Bose. Like I said, before the firmware update, definitely was a little bright on the treble side, and the bass seems a little weak. After the firmware update, the treble seems to be in control. The bass is better, but I still think with the speaker sitting just in free space, the Bose has a little better bass. But one thing I really noticed about this speaker is, if you look at the back of it, it's got a pretty big grill in the back, and the Bose one's about probably a quarter of the size, the little grill in the back of it. And this speaker has a passive radiator in the back of it. It's not a ported speaker. It's got a passive radiator, which is basically a speaker with no electrical components to move it, that it just moves in response to the front speaker. And pretty common thing for speakers to have a passive radiator. What I noticed with this is where you put this speaker in the room can have a pretty big impact on the bass response and how rich the sound is. So for example, if you have a spot in the room that's in a corner and the passive radiator can reflect off the corner and the walls of the room there, it really sounds nice. And when I put this speaker and the Bose speaker both in a corner of the room where this passive radiator could work up against the walls, I couldn't hear any difference as far as the bass response. I think it was at least as good, and the mid-range and the upper end was clearer on this speaker than the Bose speaker. So if you can put this in a room in the right place, I think it could easily equal the music response of this Bose speaker that's known for its music response. And I think that's just the, characteristics of the way the speaker's made, and the fact that it's really designed for voice reproduction, and the music's just kind of an after thing that, okay, yeah, you can listen to it with music. So it gives you more of a multifunctional speaker than the Bose speaker would ever be. So just be aware of that especially if you do have one of these or buy one of these, try moving it around in different places in the room. And like I said, if you could even use a wall, if you move it away from the wall and then move it closer to the wall, you'll hear a difference in the bass response. And it probably is going to sound better closer to a wall, or especially in the corner of a room where the bass can reflect and come out into the room, and especially for music. So anyway, that's probably the only really negative that I have about it, is the bass is a little weak, and that it is more sensitive to the location in the room than this Bose speaker that I was testing it with. And then the second thing is, hopefully they'll add some sort of an equalizer function to the profiles, so that in addition to using this hearing test, you could say, I want to manually adjust this, and you can go in and move some sliders and be able to tune the equalization on this to your taste. So I guess to sum this up, for what this thing's advertised for, it kills it. I mean, it really does a good job. If you go to their website with the links below, they have sound tests of different devices with someone speaking, and it sounds exactly like their recordings. I listen to a laptop, I listen to a tablet, listen to a phone, and then I listen to the speaker, and it's night and day. Even computer speakers don't even begin to compare with what this sounds like, listening to voice. So if you've got a student or you're a student, you're going to be listening to a lot of verbal teaching instructions. And like I said, it's amazing how much less fatiguing it is having a good quality voice sound. So I think that can wrap it up. I know this is kind of a long video, but I really wanted to kind of go in depth about this for folks that are going to be buying this. It's a $200 purchase. So if you like this video, please share, like the video. If you're an audiophile, think you might be interested in some of my audiophile content, subscribe to the channel. And until next time, have a nice day.